Okay, we'll start the class. This is week 10 of the TS session of Structural Analysis 1 taught by Professor Amit Shah. I am Trisha Chakravorty, one of the course teaching assistants. I am a PhD student at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. We'll start with a brief recap as always. Uh, Phase 1 for the first 6 weeks, we looked at analysis of determinate structures. Did we have also looked in detail about the degree of indeterminacy, the concept of indeterminacy, which means the degree of redundancy in a structure. So the more is the degree of indeterminacy, the safer the structure is. That means it can withstand more amount of failure before it actually collapses. So all real world structures are highly indeterminate. However, in this course and in a basic undergraduate structure analysis course, we start by looking at determinate structures because they are easier to solve. That we can solve only by without using any geometric or material properties. So it's a knowledge about how to solve determinate structures is necessary in knowing in learning the methods how to solve indeterminate structures. In week 1, we looked at types of internal forces. They are of four broad categories: internal axial force, torsional moment, bending moment, and shear force. And there were common classification of elements. These classification is done based not on the material or geometric properties, but by the kind of internal force we expect them to undergo. So if I have an element that is expected to undergo only axial forces, it is a truss element. If it has shear force and bending moment, it is a beam element. And if it has all three, it's a frame element. And torsional moment we generally ignored in this course because it's torsional moment is something that we generally do not allow in a structure. So if a building undergoes torsion, we would do something to eliminate it, while the axial force, shear force, and bending moment we actually design our elements for. So we accept that these kind of forces will develop in my element, and I have to give a cross sectional large enough or a material strong enough to withstand that. And then we looked at the types of boundary conditions, which are basically the restraints in an element. So there are several types. There is the roller support, which provides one displacement restraint in the direction perpendicular to the surface it lies on. The hinged or pin support, which provides two displacement restraints in the 2D plane and three displacement restraints in the 3D frame. And then the fixed support, which restrains all the displacements and moment rotations possible. There is another called internal hinge, and there are also some supports that are allowed some amount of displacement, but again those are not generally studied in an undergraduate structural analysis course in much detail. And structural indeterminacy, which we looked at in week 1 and then again from week 7. And there are basically of two types: static indeterminacy and kinematic indeterminacy. So far we have whatever we have looked at is static indeterminacy, but today, since we move into displacement methods, we will start with seeing what kinematic indeterminacy is. And bending moment and shear force diagrams, which is one of the most important topics in this course, and you will definitely get a question in whatever exam on structural analysis you give. Week 2, we looked at focused on trusses, how we idealize trusses, and the stability of trusses related to its indeterminacy, and also some other extra factors like stability. Yes, what do you mean? And how to solve the member forces in a truss. All member forces in a truss only undergo axial force, so they can be tensile or compressive. Generally, we write tension as plus and compression as minus. There are two methods: method of joints and method of sections. And week 1 and week 2, so we looked at the force or stress type responses. For beam, it's this topic: bending moment and shear force diagram. And for trusses, it's this topic: solving member forces in a truss. Then for week 3, 4, and 5 was about looking at the displacement or strain type responses in the common types of elements. So the principle of virtual work, which gives rise to the unit load method to determine displacements, the nodal displacements in a truss. Week 4, we looked at the deflection profile of beams. So in truss, basically, since all members can only undergo axial force, they only elongate or shorten along its length. And since at a node there can be multiple, like there are multiple members meeting, there is a net displacement. So basically here we are concerned about the nodal displacements and the member elongation or shortening. And in beams, since the force like the force applied on beam says transverse force. So beam, if there's a beam and the force is perpendicular to the length of the beam, so it reflects in a, like it deflects in a profile along its length. In a truss, it's just the member elongates or shorten along its length, but in the beam, the deflection is perpendicular to the length of the beam, and there's a profile which varies along the length. So for that we have three methods. The most basic is the elastic curve equation method. It is basically solving the governing differential equation of the beam. So basically all physical phenomena are governed by some differential equations. That is the law of the physical world, and the equation of the beam is, which we saw, ei d2 by dx square is m of x. M is the bending moment of x, means along the length, which goes from 0 to L if L is the length of the beam. So we will integrate that equation twice to get y as a function of x, and there will be two constants of integration which we are going to solve by implementing the boundary conditions. And in this process we will also get an expression for dy dx, which is the slope of the beam. So in a beam there are two types of strain responses or deflection responses. One is the transverse deflection, one is the rotation or the slope at every point. And this is important for today's class because we look at the slope deflection method. And there are two other methods, moment area methods and conjugate beam methods, which are shortcut methods which do not go into the basic differential equation, but they are a set of rules or laws that you can use to quickly solve the slope or deflection at a certain point. And these two, the moment area method and conjugate beam method, need practice because you have to identify which points you are going to use. And week 6 was about influence line diagrams. It is about when a load or a moment moves across the length of the beam. So it's about one particular response, for example shear force at the midpoint or a reaction force at a roller support. I take one particular response in my beam and I imagine a unit load or a unit moment moving along the length of the beam, and that is how we draw the influence line diagram along the length of the beam. And Mueller-Breslav's principle gives the ILD qualitatively. And then we saw, once we have the influence line diagram of a beam, we saw how to find out absolute maximum bending moment and shear force under point load, series of point loads, and so on. And this will be needed. This is the step. So structural analysis is a step before the design of the structure. So first we have a broad set of forces coming on the structure. For example, if it's a beam, it's the basic loading condition. For example, they can be UDL. If it is a building, for example, wind load, earthquake load, all sorts of loads. That is my input, and I also am generally given the boundary conditions. Then what I do is I carry out a structural analysis to find out the internal forces. So the internal stresses, the internal displacements I'm expecting, and after that when we are doing design, what we do is I have already solved the internal forces, so I'm going to take a call on what should be the cross sectional area, what should be the material, and so on. So structure analysis followed by design is basically the practical part of civil engineering. And then phase 2 is that about analysis of indeterminate structures. We have looked at degree of structure indeterminacy, but we have only looked at static indeterminacy so far. Today we will look at kinematic indeterminacy. Introduction to force and displacement methods. The previous 3 weeks, weeks 7, 8, and 9, were about the force methods, the method of consistent deformation, which is one easy application of force methods applied to trusses, beams, and frames. Maxwell-Betty's reciprocal theorem. It's a shortcut method basically, and this method of consistent deformations, which is a force method, and degree of kinematic indeterminacy we will look at today, and then the displacement methods. These three we have looked at, and today week 10 we will look at the slope deflection methods. So the method of consistent deformation applied to the three types of structural elements, you can see quite clearly that what we are doing is the same. The concept is the same, whatever my element type be, but there are some differences. Just so you should practice all three types. So because it's not, basically if you have not practiced, what happens in this course is, since the calculations are very elaborate, there is a high chance of making mistakes or forgetting a simple thing. Like a common thing is that in these methods we have the ei in the bottom, right? So in the integration or in the summation we have a ei or ae term in the bottom. It's a common mistake to miss out on that, and if you miss out you will lose marks. So just practice with any standard book and check the answers. And structural indeterminacy, structures that cannot be analyzed using statics or equations of equilibrium only are called indeterminate structures. They require other material properties to be solved. The degree of indeterminacy is the number of unknown reactions minus the number of equations of equilibrium. External indeterminacy is the total number of independent support reactions minus the total number of available equations of static equilibrium. This second term, this minus this term is always fixed. In a 2D plane, it's 3. In a 3D space, it's 6. And the total number of independent support reactions depends on the what boundary conditions I have. I have to add them and see. An internal indeterminacy is the total number of internal reactions. Internal reactions example is in a truss, each member force is an internal reaction basically, minus available equations of equilibrium. And the total degree of structural indeterminacy is the summation of these two. We have looked at these examples. A cantilever beam is determinate since it has two support reactions here. I can also say three support reactions, but generally since a beam will not undergo axial force, see, we are not explicitly told this is a beam member, okay, so it can also be a frame member. But if since this is a common configuration of a beam, I can just say that it will not undergo axial force, especially since the loading is given in the vertical direction. So I will say that the support reactions, there are two. One is the shear and like in the vertical direction, and one is the moment into or outside the plane. And there are two equations of equilibrium: sigma Fy equal to 0 and sigma m equal to 0. This summation of m can be taken about any point in the plane. This is a propped cantilever. It has one extra roller reaction here, so the degree of indeterminacy is 1. Here, in this a frame element, like a frame structure. Each of these are frame elements, and this is a frame structure overall. There are three support reactions here, three here, and the equations of equilibrium is 3. So its degree of indeterminacy is 6 minus 3, that is 3. And this frame has two hinge supports, so 2 plus 2, 4 unknown reactions and 3 equations, so 1 degree of indeterminacy. Force or compatibility of flexibility methods. These are force methods and displacement methods, as we have seen, are methods to solve indeterminate structures. So they are of the forces are of two categories based on my approach. The force methods In the force methods, the redundant forces are chosen as unknowns, and additional equations are obtained by considering the geometric conditions imposed on the deformation of the structure, which are the compatibility conditions which ensure continuity in a physical structure. These are some methods: method of consistent deformation, virtual work or unit load method, strain energy method, method of minimum potential energy, and flexibility matrix method. This is the one we have seen in the previous 3 weeks. This is the one generally covered in undergraduate courses applied to beams, frames, and trusses. And the complementary set of equations methods is displacement or equilibrium or stiffness methods. Here, the displacement of joints are taken as unknowns, and equilibrium equations are expressed in terms of these displacements and internal loads. These equations are solved to give the actual joint displacements from which redundant forces can be calculated. There are three methods: the slope deflection method, which we will look at this week, then moment distribution methods, and the stiffness matrix method in the last week of the. Also, there's a recap class looking at the entire course overview with an overview of the entire course that will be next Thursday, 10th April at 7 o'clock. It's a 1 hour class. So differences between two methods, force methods and displacement methods. Here the unknowns are taken as internal member forces or reactions. Here the unknowns are taken as joint displacements. In force methods, to find the unknowns, we write the compatibility conditions, and in displacement methods, to write the equations, we to find the unknowns, we write the joint equilibrium conditions. So compatibility conditions and equilibrium conditions are the complementary conditions or restraints that are always like so, satisfied by a structure. Here, the number of equations needed is degree of static indeterminacy, which we have looked at. And here, the number of equations needed is a degree of kinematic indeterminacy, which we will look at today. This method is suitable, of course, when degree of static indeterminacy is lesser than degree of kinematic indeterminacy. So then if ds is less than dk, then here we'll have lesser number of equations in the force method, since the number of equations will be equal to the degree of indeterminacy. And here this method is suitable when ds is greater than dk. So if kinematic indeterminacy is lesser, I will prefer the displacement method. Kinematic indeterminacy. Degree of kinematic indeterminacy refers to the total number of independent available degrees of freedom at all joints. The degree of kinematic indeterminacy may be defined as the total number of unrestrained displacement components at all joints. So, what are the displacement components? That is not restricted only to translational displacement. It also means the available rotation thing. So in type, let's see in type of joints what are the degree possible degrees of freedom we have. In a 2D truss joint, there are two degrees of freedom available: delta x and delta y. This is what we have also seen when we solve the. You remember in we use a unit load method to solve the displacement in a truss in week 3. There also what we got was at every node we got x displacement and a y displacement. X and y, again, as I keep saying, x and y are not just horizontal vertical axis. There can be any two mutually perpendicular directions. So in a 3D truss joint, there are three degrees of freedom available: delta x, delta y, and delta z. So again, three mutually perpendicular directions which define the 3D space. In a 2D rigid joint is what any beam joint or a frame joint are rigid joints basically. So and in a truss, we know that all the members are pinned. We would have read that. So every node is a pinned joint. So that's called a truss joint. And in beam and frame, it's a rigid joint. So for 2D rigid joint, there are three degrees of freedom available. There can be translational x displacement, translational y displacement, and there can be rotation in the z direction. Because if you look at a plane, it can move like this. A point can move like this, and it can rotate like this. And if you see, the sense is into or outside the plane. So that's theta z. And in a 3D rigid joint, there are 6 degrees of freedom available. There can be three translational displacement, and there can be three rotational as well. So in a 3D space, you can rotate like this along this axis. You can rotate like this, which is along this axis, and you can also rotate like this, which is about this axis. So there can be three: theta x, theta y, theta z, and three translational, of course. So degree of let's look at the formula. The formula will be like self-explanatory. Degree of kinematic indeterminacy for plane truss, 2D truss. In a pin jointed plane truss, each joint has 2 degrees of freedom, delta x and delta y. Therefore, j number of joints, they will have 2j degrees of freedom. And we know that Re will be the support reactions. Hence, at supports, joint displacements will not be available in direction of reaction. So the total number of unrestrained displacements at all joints will be 2j minus Re. So what it basically says is that suppose there is a truss with 10 joints, and there is one in hinge support at suppose on the left end. So at that node, it is part of one of the 10 nodes that I've seen. But since it is a hinge support, the delta x and delta y at that joint are restrained. So that's why in this minus Re, in this Re I will add 2 for the hinge support, since the x and the y displacement at that joint is restrained. And suppose there is a roller support at the right end, so that restrains the delta y at one another joint. So my Re will be 3, and I have to subtract this Re from 2j. So 10 was total number of nodes, so I was supposed to have 10 into 2, 20 degrees of freedom. Possible degrees of freedom are 20. So two degrees of freedom at each joint. But two two reactions, like two displacements at my left end and one displacement at my right end are restrained. So this will be 20 minus 3, that is 17. My degree of kinematic indeterminacy will be 17. For space truss, 2D truss, the decay is 3j minus Re, because at each joint there are 3 degrees of freedom. For rigid jointed plane frame, decay is 3j minus Re, and for rigid jointed space frame, decay is 6j minus Re. 6 because there are 6 degrees of freedom available here. In the above analysis, all members are considered axially inextensible, and all above displacements are elastic displacements. Special case: in rigid frame, if some of the members are actually rigid, then axial displacements in such members may not be available. Hence, degree of freedom will be reduced. For 2D rigid jointed frame, I will subtract m dash if m dash are a number of actually rigid members. And for 3D rigid jointed frame, decay is 6j minus Re minus m dash again. So what this m dash is doing is that, suppose I have a member in a frame which is actually rigid, so it does not have that, like, it does not have 1 degree of freedom. For each member I get one less degree of freedom. So if there are 3 actually rigid members, I will find the normal decay and I will subtract 3, because the axial displacement for those 3 members are restrained. Okay, so let's look at examples now. Determine degree of kinematic indeterminacy for the cantilever if the beam is actually flexible, if the beam is actually rigid. So now see, one thing you see is that in a beam, I generally do not expect axial force to come, but at the end of the day, there can be some kind of force that I don't expect to come on the beam. So if it is actually flexible, I have to assume for this question that it can have axial force, it can undergo axial force. So there are two joints here. So as we have looked at in the last class as well, every support reaction, every internal hinge or every end point are joints. So J is 2 here, A and B, and there are 3 support reactions since this is a fixed support. So just one second. Yes, so there are two joints A and B, and there are three support reactions. The three unknowns at the fixed support. So dk here is 3j minus rd. 3j since each joint has three possible degrees of freedom. Since this is a beam element, like a rigid joint, so 3 into 2 minus 3, that is 3. And if the beam is actually rigid, this one extra, like since there is one member, I have to subtract 1 from this degree of kinematic indeterminacy. So it is 3 into 2 minus 3 minus 1, that is 2. The kinematic indeterminacy for this beam, again find the decay when member AB is actually rigid. So there are two joints A and B, and the two number of support reactions is 4. So 2 here, here x direction y direction, x direction y direction, 3j minus RD. So 3 into 2 minus 4 is 2, and these two degrees of freedom are basically rotation here and rotation here. Let's see, look at this interpretation. The decay here is 3. So what are my three remaining degrees of freedom? It's It can go in the x direction, it can displace in the y direction, it can also rotate about the z axis. And if the B maybe is actually rigid, then it has 2 degrees of freedom. It can go up and down vertically, and it can rotate into the z direction, z plane. So here the 2 degrees of freedom at theta A and theta B. If we consider AB as actually rigid, then decay will be the same as previous case, because axial displacement was already restrained, right? Even if whether it is actually rigid or actually flexible, since A and B both are hinge supports, anyway the horizontal displacement is completely restrained. So here this won't make a difference. So the decay will remain 2, since theta A and theta B are still free. Is another special case. In rigid jointed frames, some of the joints may be hybrid, then additional degree of freedom will be available. So decay will increase. Hybrid means the internal hinge thing, as we have looked at in static indeterminacy as well. For 2D rigid jointed frame, decay is 3j minus RE minus M dash plus RR, and for 3D we add RR, and RR for is basically total is sigma m dash minus 1, where m dash is number of members meeting at a hybrid joint. This is for 2D, and we know for 3D it will be sigma 3 into m dash minus 1. So, the number of independent degrees of freedom for the two span continuous beam of uniform sections. It doesn't really matter whether the section is uniform or varying here. The beam are considered to be rigid jointed open frame. So there are three joints: one, two, three, and so three J is three, and the number of reactions is one for this roller, one for this roller, and three for this fixed support. So five. Decay is 3 into 3 minus 5, that is 4. Now this is a problem with an internal hinge. So how many joints are there? 4. And there is no actually rigid, or like no actually rigid member. So m dash is that m dash dash is 0, and there are two members meeting at my internal hinge. So RR is m dash minus 1, 2 minus 1, so it's 1. And the number of reactions is 3 from this fixed support and 2 from this hinge support, so 5. So the decay is 3 into 4 minus 5 plus 1, that is 8. uh, Considering the beam is actually flexible, there are three joints. There are five support reactions: two at the hinge support, three at the fixed support. And since it's actually flexible, m double dash is 0, and there are two members meeting at the internal hinge again. So my RR is 2 minus 1, that is 1. So decay is 3 into 3 minus 5 minus 0 plus 1, that is 5. Rigid jointed frame. This problem I think we have already looked at the static indeterminacy for this problem. Let's look at the kinematic indeterminacy. Joints is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and RE is 3 from this fixed support, 2 from this hinge support, and 2 from this kind of support, which basically allows, it is a roller support with three wheels, so it allows horizontal displacement, but it restrains vertical displacement and also restrains the rotation. So and m dash dash, the number of actually rigid members. Okay, it is given that assume the beams are actually inextensible. So basically in a frame structure like this, the vertical members are called columns and the horizontal members are called beams. So there are four beams here. M dash dash is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So decay is 3j minus RE minus m dash double dash plus RR. RR is 0. So that's 16. And let us look at the degrees of freedom here physically. Each rigid joint in a 2D plane is supposed to have degrees of freedom: vertical, horizontal, and rotation. So here there is 3, here there is 3, here there is 3. Here, here, and here there is 3. Okay, no, wait, sorry. Since these two are basically actually, these two members are actually rigid, this, if I am allowing what horizontal displacement here, I cannot allow horizontal displacement here and here. So there is 3 here, 2, 2, 2, 2. This point is completely fixed. This point only can undergo rotation, and this point can only undergo horizontal displacement. So adding them, you will get 16. For this 2D frame, find decay and show all the displacement components. Number of joints is like same as previous, except there's one here, because since all free ends are also separate joints, okay, since they also have 3 degrees of freedom. RE is 3 plus 2 plus 1, 6, and we get 24, and we draw, since there are no actually rigid members, it all these unrestrained points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all these 7 points have 3 degrees of freedom: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like that we have written 3. And this point is completely fixed. It has no kinematic degree of freedom left. The hinge support has a rotational degree of freedom, and the roller support has a rotational and a horizontal degree of freedom. The vertical is restricted here. So adding them, you will get 24 here. Okay. Are there any doubts about kinematic indeterminacy? So slope deflection method. In the slope deflection method, the relationship is established between the moments at the end of the members and the corresponding rotations and displacements. The slope deflection method can be used to analyze statically in determinate and indeterminate beams and frames, but we don't generally use it to analyze determinate structures because it will make the calculation unnecessarily long and complicated. So there's some sign conventions for end moments. Clockwise end moments are taken as positive, and anti-clockwise end moments are taken as negative. So MAB. So here, this if it is negative, it's called it's negative since it's anti-clockwise, and MBA is clockwise, so it's positive. For slopes or rotations, clockwise rotations are taken as positive and anti-clockwise rotations are taken as negative. So theta A here is clockwise, so it's positive. Theta B is anti-clockwise. So see at this side and this end, the sense is remains the same. Anti-clockwise it's negative, and theta C is again positive. So because it's clockwise. Deflection in case of settlements, positive deflections, those displacement or deflections will be positive, which produces clockwise rotation to the member. So this you have to understand a little bit. So if this is displacing in the downward direction, it's providing a rotation on the member in this sense, so it's a clockwise sense. So I am going to say that theta is positive, and negative deflection is those displacements will be negative, which produce anti-clockwise rotation to the member. So if I am displacing this point like this, then I'm and the member is basically rotating in the anti-clockwise sense, so this delta will be negative. So keep in mind that the sign convention of the deflection does not depend on upward positive, downward negative, that kind of thing. You have to imagine the deflection, see what kind of rotation it is producing in the structure, and only then you can assign the sign to it. Derivation of slope deflection equations. Now let's consider a segment AB of a continuous beam as shown. The slope deflection equations are derived by superimposing the end moments developed due to applied load, rotation of joint, rotation of joint A, rotation of joint B, and settlement of support B with respect to A. So there is one theta A, one theta B, one delta, and one applied force P here. So this is my AB beam. Suppose it's deflecting, so suppose it's deflecting in any way. I don't know what that. I'm going to split them. So due to the load, there will be MAB and MBA at the end. Then due to the rotation of joint A, there will be a rotation 4 EI by L theta A and 2 EI by L theta A here. Then due to rotation of joint B, there will be 2 EI by L theta B here and 4 EI by L theta B here. These are all the end moments, okay. And due to settlement, if there is a settlement, there might not be a settlement also, then this delta will be 0. So this value is 6 EI by 6 EI delta by L square and 6 EI delta by L square at both ends. So the span AB can be subjected to a combination of multiple loading as shown above. In the beam shown, the fixed end moment at ends A and B will be MAB and MBA respectively. In the beam shown here, the if joint A rotates by an angle A, then the fixed end moments at A and B will be, as I said, 4 EI by, so the joint which is rotating, at that end I'm going to get 4 EI by L theta A, and the other end I'm going to get 2 EI by L theta A. This is both of these are theta A, keep that in mind, since these end moments are due to rotation at joint A. And in the beam shown in this figure 3, if point B rotates by an angle theta B, then fixing moments at end B and A will be, at B it will be 4 EI by L theta B, and at A it will be 2 EI by L theta B. And if support B settles down delta with respect to support A, causing rotation to member BA in clockwise direction, then fixed end moments produced at B and A will be MBA will be minus 6 CI by 6 CI theta by L square. This minus is due to the sign, and MAB will be also the same. Thus, the final moment at in the fixed end moments at A and B due to multiple effects, since these are all linear elastic structures, they, we can apply the principle of linear superposition. So this basically just add up all the moments algebraically. So MAB overall will be MAB bar, which is due to this applied load. These have some formulas and rules to find out. Plus 4 EI by L theta A plus 2 EI by L theta B minus 6 EI theta delta by L square. And similarly, MVA will have a similar formula. So just we have to remember these, okay. And the steps for to solve an indeterminate structure using slope deflection is, first I'm going to consider each span is fixed and find the fixed end moment for each span due to the given loading. Note that if any support settles, then we do not find the fixed end moments separately because we already have to consider its effect in derivation of slope deflection method. Step 2 is we will take theta and delta as unknown because we don't know that, right? It's an indeterminate structure. We cannot find out. We don't know the rotations and deflections. So we are going to take the theta and delta as unknown and write slope deflection equations for n moments as we saw in this. So MAB is this equation, MBA is this equation in short form. Like it's we take 2A by L common and make a smaller, like a more compact form. These two equations. Then step 3 is the main solving step. So it's okay. Also, you see that since we are taking the theta and delta as unknown, this is what we looked at when we looked at force methods. Sorry, displacement methods. What is it? The unknowns are taken as the joint displacements. So that and the number of joint displacement is the degree of kinematic indeterminacy. So that is why we looked at kinematic indeterminacy in this class. So this number of theta and delta will be the degree of kinematic indeterminacy in the structure. Step 3 is we will find these unknown joint displacements theta and delta by using moment equilibrium conditions and shear equations. The number of moment equilibrium conditions is the number of rotational displacement components, and the number of shear equations is the number of translational displacement components. In step 4, now that we have the theta and delta, we are going to substitute the value of unknowns in slope deflection equations and determine the end moment. So here, I have theta A and theta B and delta. These three were my unknowns for each member. I put them and I get MAB and MBA. And my final step is we will draw the many moment diagram by superimposing n moment BMD and free BMD for each span. It will become clear when we look at an example. So why are we drawing see why are we drawing the many moment diagram here? Because when, as I have said, that a structure can have two types of responses: the force responses and the displacement responses. So in these displacement methods, we take the displacements and rotations to be unknowns. So my process of solving is I first solve the displacement and rotations, then I find out the forces at the ends, and then I find out the internal forces, which is basically the bending moment, shear force, or axial force. And in the force methods, we approached it in the opposite side, right? We found out the forces, the end reactions, the support reactions, and the forces, and then we found out the displacements. So you can see that these the two classes of approaches are thus just opposite the same problem from opposite ends. This is an example of a continuous beam. So it has a fixed end, then it has like it's fixed, and it has a roller support in the middle. So we find first, so AB is one span and BC is another span. Okay. So first we find out the end moments for span BC. For this span, MAB bar is, you have to remember these values over. You will find it in standard textbook. For UDL, if there is a UDL in the span, then the fixed end moments will be PL by 8. So MAB is, and you can, the signs you will understand that from that sign convention. MAB will be, sorry, one second. If there is a concentrated load at the midpoint of a span like AB, this will be AB. So then the fixed end moments are PL by 8 and PL by 8, and the sign says if it is a downward load, then at the left end, so M bar AB will be minus PL by 8 and M bar BA will be plus PL by 8. And if there is a UDL, then the formula is minus WL square by 12. And again, if it's in the downward direction, then MBC, the left end will be minus and the right end will be plus. So I get MAB bar is minus 45, MBA bar is plus 45. MBC bar is minus 36, MCB bar is plus 36. All these are in kilonewton meter. In step 2, I'm going to write down the slope deflection equation. So what are my unknowns here? Here, both the delta and theta is restrained. Here, the delta in the upward direction is, like in the vertical direction, is restrained, but the theta is free. And here, again, everything is restrained. So I just have one unknown here. The degree of kinematic indeterminacy in this structure is 1. Even if you put it in the formula, you will see there are 3 joints and there are 5 support reactions. 5 no, 3 plus 1. So 7 support reactions. So there is 1 degree of kinematic indeterminacy. So MAB in the equation that we saw, MAB bar plus 2EI, 2 theta A plus theta B minus 3 delta by L. So here theta A is 0 and delta is also 0. So for this beam AB span, only the rotation at B, that is theta B, is free. So I write this equation as an MAB bar I have already solved. So it's minus 45 plus 2EI by 6 theta B. 6 is the span of this, like the length of this AB part. And for the other end, I'm going to write MBA is plus 45 plus 2ei by plus 4ei by 6 theta b, since there is 2 theta b here. Then for member BC, similarly there is theta B is free, but the delta is restrained and theta C is also restrained. So MBC is MBC bar, that is minus 36 plus 2 EI by 6 into 2 theta B, and MCB is MCB bar plus 2 EI by L 2 theta C plus theta C is 0, so it comes down to this theta plus 36 plus 2 EI by 6 theta B. Okay. Now I will add the joint equilibrium conditions. So this is AB, this is the B joint, and this is BC. So we have the unknown theta B, that is the rotational displacement. Hence, one joint equilibrium condition is required. What is that joint equilibrium condition? At joint B, I know that MBA and MBC, they have to add up to 0, because it's yeah, they have to be basically equal in, they have to, sorry, they don't have to add up to 0, they have to be equal in magnitude basically, since it's a continuous, this is a compatibility condition. So minus, I write 45 plus 4ei by 6 theta b plus minus 36 plus 4ei theta b by 6. So from that I solve theta b to be this, it has a by e, I don't forget that. And then I'm going to find out the final end moment. Since now I have theta b, I can just put it in this equation, this MAB equation, MBA equation, M CB equation, and MBC equation. So I get these, and you will see that this was the condition we imposed, right? MBA and MBC should be equal and opposite in magnitude. So the support. So I have the four fixed end moments. So now what I do is I draw the separate spans, and I put the fixed end moments MAB and MBA here, and then I solve it like a normal beam. So I have a P here, like P is my applied force, and there will be one RA and RB. So that will be like, I write RB1 here, since B is part of both this span and that span. So I solve it like I would normally solve, solve a beam which has two vertical restraints, and it has one applied load in the midpoint, and it has two applied moments. So from that I will just solve using my equations of equilibrium for this span. Treat it as an ordinary beam now with two applied moments at the two ends. So delta MB equal to 0. From that I get RA, and delta MB equal to 0 from span. So I get RA, from that I can get RB1, right? By doing sigma Fy equal to 0. And for this span I get, again I put delta MD equal to 0. From that I get RC, and RB1 also I can, RB2 I can get by at doing delta Fy equal to 0. So for this delta Fy equal to 0, I get I get RA, RB1 plus RB2. So that I add that up to get RB in general, like the total RB from the roller support, and RC, and I have the support reactions here. So basically, these applied moments that we have gone, the fixed state moments that we have got, are the support moments at A and C. Since these are fixed support, there is MA and MC that I have got. So this is my overall beam. What all are there? All my support reactions are here. So for the fixed end, there is a horizontal. Sorry, there is a vertical reaction. There is a moment. For my roller support, there is a vertical reaction. From this fixed end also, there is a vertical reaction and a moment. And I have two applied load conditions. So there is one point load and one UDL. And what I do is I just superimpose two bending moment diagrams. I For this fixed end moments, first I draw this only this fixed end moment. So this is 47.25 and this is 33.75. I know that, suppose the beam only had two fixed end moments, then it would have a bending moment diagram of this nature. The These will just join with a straight line, and then forget about the forget about the support moments, and only look at these forces. Then I know that the bending moment diagram will be a straight line here and a parabola here, which we have looked at in the first class. For UDL, it's a parabola. For point load, it's joined by straight lines. And then I can linearly superimpose these. So basically, this is not the final nature. This is just a hint of the nature. So this and this part I have to add and subtract algebraically to get the overall bending moment diagram. You won't be asked to draw the nature, because like superimposing these two diagrams will give a very odd shape of a bending moment diagram, and you can't really do it by hand. But this will be enough. Okay. Is there any question for this method so far? So this was a fairly like a example covering all the things we can get in slope deflection, except so like the sub settlement part. Let me see if I have that here. I think this one in CD there will be a delta. One second. Okay, now since there is no delta here, let's look at this example to see how the delta is implemented. We are going to analyze the continuous beam shown here by slope deflection method. Support B settles down by 5 mm. So what it means is that it does provide a vertical force, a vertical reaction force, but it also settles by 5 mm. And E and I, the values are given. So for this member AB, this is one span. Member AB, MAB is MAB bar, and this MAB bar will be 0 here because there is no force applied in this span, plus 2 ei by L 2y into this formula theta a, theta b, and delta. So now theta a is 0 because this is a fixed support, so the rotation is not allowed. Theta b has some non-zero value and delta is 0.005. Why is it positive? Since it is providing a clockwise rotation in the member. Now, see the interesting thing, there is no applied movement at all in this structure. So, if the support did not settle, the entire forces and displacement in the structure would be 0. But there is a displacement. For that, the beam undergoes a deflection and it will have some kind of bending moment and shear force. So, this I put this in the formula. Here I get this component of delta. So, I get MAB and MBA equations in terms of theta B. Theta A is 0 and delta I have already been given. For member BC, for MBC bar and MCB bar are again 0 because there is no applied force in the span. And here the delta I have to take 0.005 minus because just look at the span BC. For that, if B is settling by 5 mm, then it is providing an anti-clockwise movement. So be careful. So when you put the sign of delta, look at which span I am looking at and just imagine the rotation of that span. So here I put minus 5 mm. MBC and MCB, I get two equations. Here, theta B and theta C are both non-zero because this is a roller support, this is a roller support. We know that in roller support, the points are free to rotate. So, I get another two equations, and in member CD, even the delta is 0 because C is not displacing. Theta C is non-zero and theta D is again 0 since this is a fixed end. So, I get two equations here in terms of theta C, MCD and MDC. Equilibrium equations. What are the equilibrium equations I'm going to write? I have two joints B and C. So I'm going to write, consider the joint equilibrium of joint B, MBA plus MBC will be 0. So I get one equation, and also from the joint equilibrium of C I will get MCB and MCD has to be 0. From that I had two unknowns, right? The number of unknowns is basically going to be my number of equations, that is for sure. So theta B and theta C are my two unknowns and I get two equations. I solve them simultaneously and get these values theta B and theta C. These are in radians, okay? We are used to working with angles in degrees, but when we solve it from all these equations, we get in radians. If you can convert it into degree if you want, then I find the final end moments by I have all these six equations: MAB, MBA, MBC, MCB, MCD, and MDC. I'm going to put theta B and theta C values here, and I will just verify that MBA and MBC are adding up to 0. MCB and DC are CB and CD are adding up to 0. So I've got correct answers, and to get the support reactions, I'm going to consider the three spans separately: AB, DC, and CD. So I put the end reactions, the end fixed end moments, and since there is no load here, RA and RB1, I'm going to find only by these applied moments. I'm going to do delta MB equal to 0 and get RA, and I'm going to do delta FY equal to 0 to get RB1. From this, I will get RB2 and RC1. From this, I'll get RC1 and RD. So I have all the support reactions. And when I draw the bending moment diagram, what I do again is I'm going to draw one part due to I'm going to do a superimposition. One part of the bending moment diagram I'm going to just join the fixed end moments, and the other part I'm going to do due to the reactions. So here, since there is no applied moments, the bending moment diagram and shear force diagrams are relatively simpler. So SFD are three straight lines and BMD is just joined by straight lines. Okay, so this is also another example, but it will be approached in exactly the same manner. So, are there any doubts? Okay, so this is basically these two examples cover all the variations we might have in slope deflection methods. The rest, all of these you just have to identify the spans. You have to identify the unknown joint displacement or deflections, and then you are going to find out the you are going to apply the joint equilibrium equations and solve them. After that, whatever you are asked for the post processing, you will do. You might not be asked bending moment diagram. You might just be asked that find the fixed end moment at this joint, then end the problem there. But the ultimate product is to get the bending moment and shear force diagram, so I get the entire force response of my beam. This is another example. This is another example. I'm going to take AB, BC, and CT spans, and so on. So, and there is an elastic curve. This is not really required. Like, this elastic curve is how the beam deflects. You can intuitively understand that, but you won't be asked to draw this because we have, like, of course you are not supposed to solve the uh, d2 by dx square equal to m of x, that m of x by ei, that huge thing cannot be solved for such a complicated problem. So you generally won't be asked this. And so this is the first displacement method that we looked at. Next class we are going to look at moment rotation method, and the last class we are going to look at stiffness matrix method. Slope deflection and moment rotation methods are generally used by hand, and the stiffness matrix method is a computerized version of it. It's in a framework where you can easily write the code and let the computer solve it, because up to 3 or 4 spans you can solve, but if it becomes more than that, you cannot solve by hand. So, are there any questions overall in this course so far? Okay, then you may leave. We have class next Tuesday, and then we have an extra class next Thursday.
मैम प्लीज रिपीट again.
Yes.
मैम अभी आपने क्या बोला मैं सुन नहीं पाया था.
Oh, acha, acha. So the next class is on Tuesday as regular class, and there is
Okay.
one extra recap session on next Thursday. So 10th April, 7 o'clock. You will probably
Okay.
get the notification from that.
Yes, ma'am.
If there are no doubts, you can leave. I'll wait for 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. discussion is over. If you have any doubt, you can ask. Okay, so I'll end the class. We'll meet at the next class next Tuesday.